What's going on, everyone? CE420. 3 tips on how to get the perfect dry, not to be confused with curing. If you want to learn how to cure, I have a how to burp cannabis video linked in the description. Go click on that video if you want to learn purely about curing the cannabis. Today we are going to talk about the pre-cure dry. You cut your plant down. Now, how do you get that perfect dry before you put it into the jars for the curing stage? Let's get into it. Tip number 1, you have to have good conditions. Conditions obviously include light, humidity or relative humidity, and temperature. Those are the 3 big components when it comes to environment. Space is a secondary one. Root zone, which would be your pot size, is a secondary one in my opinion. But the 3 primary ones are temperature, relative humidity, and light. So what conditions are we going to have there? Let's start off with light. When you're doing a dry, complete darkness. This goes for the dry and the cure. As dark as you can possibly get it. Put it in a sealed room. It does not want to see the light. This is because cannabinoids like THC degrade in the light. So if you want to keep your potency, if you want to keep your quality, you're going to keep it away from the light. It is done perspirating, it is done photosynthesizing. The light is only going to do bad things at this point as soon as you chop it down. So as soon as you chop it down, as little light as possible. The relative humidity and the temperature are both going to be the same. I recommend that you at least start, if this is your first ever drying period, you're going to want 60% relative humidity. Now it can vary between 63 and 57, but try to keep it around that 60 range. 75 humidity, 75% relative humidity is where mold will start to grow, so you really want to be careful to keep it under that 70 range. And then anything below like 55 is just too dry. You're going to dry out your bud way too quickly. It's not going to retain any of its moisture, and it's not going to retain any of its terpenes if the conditions are too dry. So try to keep it at that 60% range. Again, you can vary a little bit, but really try to keep it at 60 if you can. And temperature, gonna be exactly the same as the humidity. Gonna keep it at 60. The reason being is because it needs to be kept at a cool temperature for 2 very important reasons. 1, if the temperature is too high, it will dry out too fast. If the temperature is too low, it potentially won't dry out at all and might even freeze if it's way too cold because of all the moisture in the bud. And you want to keep the terpenes from evaporating, and you want to keep the trichomes from degrading. That will both happen with extreme heat. Different terpenes evaporate at different temperatures. Some will start to evaporate at 65, some will start to evaporate at 75. All evaporate over 75. So you want to keep it definitely under 70 and try to keep it at 60 if you can, to really retain as much terpene as possible. Try to retain as much of that quality as possible. Again, quality is very important when you finally hit the dry and the cure stage, because this is where it all comes together. Tip number 3 is talking about when it is finally finished, when it is done, when it is time to do your final trim, put it in the jar for the curing stage. And you're going to want to look at both the stem and you're going to want to look at the bud itself. So for the stem conditions, what you're waiting for is it to be dry to the touch, but not so dry that it's like bone dry. It can be a little bit difficult to get a feel for. I wish I could show you a good example, but you're going to want to wait for it to be somewhat dry to the touch, and you want to bend it. And when you bend it, you want it to crease rather than snap, or rather than just kind of squeeze like a sponge. Because if it's too wet, it'll feel squishy and it'll squeeze like a sponge. But if it's drier, it'll be a little bit harder and it'll have a crease to it if it has a good amount of moisture in it. Now for the actual bud conditions, what you're going to want to feel for is you're going to want to feel for a little bit of a crisp on the surface of the bud and enough moisture inside the bud where it will kind of bounce back slowly. That's about the point you're going to want to think about your final trim. Definitely coming up soon. You're going to want to get that in the jar as soon as possible. That's your conditions. Also, a bonus tip is inside of your drying room, make sure you keep air circulating. Now, it does not need to be much. Very low air circulation is needed. However, it is very important to keep your air from being stagnant so that mold doesn't grow even in the lower humidity conditions, and to keep your bud drying without evaporating terpenes. A gentle breeze, a little bit of air movement will definitely do that, but it is mostly to keep those spores from landing and settling on your plants. So with that, that is today's video. I hope it helps you guys with your first ever dry if you're getting to that point. If you want to check out more videos, please hit my channel link down below. I got a ton of videos on how to grow cannabis. And if you want to see future videos from CE420, do not hesitate to hit the white or black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen and ring the bell for notifications. But leave your comments and thoughts down below. Thank you for joining me. I will see you next time.